The mahogany walls of Dr. Peterson's office seemed to close in around Harrison Caldwell as the physician delivered words that would shatter his carefully constructed world. Harrison sat perfectly still in the leather chair, his tailored charcoal suit immaculate, his silver hair combed back with precision, but inside, everything was crumbling. 8 weeks. Mr. Caldwell? Perhaps 10 if we're fortunate. The cancer has spread beyond what we initially thought. Harrison's jaw tightened. 67 years of building an empire, of conquering every challenge the business world threw at him, and now this. An enemy he couldn't negotiate with, couldn't buy off, couldn't defeat. He nodded once, a sharp movement that dismissed the doctor's sympathetic expression. I understand. Thank you for your candor, Dr. Peterson. As Harrison stood to leave, his legs felt heavier than they ever had. Even after his morning runs through Central Park that he'd maintained for decades. He walked through the clinic's pristine hallways, past the watercolor paintings meant to soothe anxious patients, past the reception desk where people waited with hope in their eyes. Hope he no longer had. Mr. Caldwell, wait please. He turned to see a young woman hurrying toward him, her scrubs a soft blue that matched her eyes. She carried a folder he'd apparently left behind. Her name tag read, Emma Rivers, nursing assistant. You forgot this, she said, slightly breathless. Your treatment plan and medication schedule. Harrison took the folder, studying her face for a moment. There was something different about her expression. Not pity, not the careful professional distance most medical staff maintained. It was genuine concern, the kind that came from understanding loss personally. Thank you, Miss Rivers. Emma. Please, she hesitated, then added quietly. My father had the same diagnosis 2 years ago. If you need someone to talk to who understands, I'm here most afternoons. Something in her words struck a chord deep within Harrison's chest. In a world where people had wanted things from him for so long, here was someone offering something freely, expecting nothing in return. Over the next 2 weeks, Harrison found himself scheduling his appointments late in the afternoon. Emma would bring him water, adjust his four during treatments, and sometimes they would talk. She told him about her father, a construction worker who'd fought his illness with dignity. She spoke of her mother's medical bills that still haunted the family. Of her younger brother in college struggling to stay enrolled, Harrison learned that Emma worked double shifts. Splitting her time between the clinic and a nursing home across town, she lived in a small apartment in Queens, took the subway everywhere, and somehow still managed to smile genuinely at strangers. She was everything his world was not. Warm, selfless, alive in a way that had nothing to do with wealth. It was during his 4th treatment session that the idea formed. Harrison watched Emma laugh with an elderly patient, saw how she held the woman's hand while explaining a procedure, and he realized something profound. He was going to die alone in his penthouse, surrounded by expensive art and empty rooms. Alone. The word echoed in his mind. Like a death knell, his daughter from his first marriage had moved to London years ago and barely called. His son from his second marriage cared only about the family business and when he'd inherit it. His third wife had left him a decade ago, taking a substantial settlement and never looking back. He'd built an empire but forgotten to build a life, Emma Harrison said, when they were alone in the treatment room. I need to ask you something unusual. She looked up from checking his vitals, her expression open and curious. I'm listening. Harrison had rehearsed this moment, but now the words felt absurd in his mouth. Yet he pressed forward because time was the one commodity he could no longer afford to waste. I have no one, Emma. No one who will be there at the end. No one who cares whether I live or die beyond what they might inherit. He paused, measuring his next words carefully. I want to make you an offer. Marry me. Emma's eyes widened, and she took a small step back. Mr. Caldwell, I don't understand. Let me finish, please. Harrison's voice was steady, the same tone he used in boardrooms when closing billion-dollar deals. I have 2 months, perhaps less. I don't want to die alone, and I don't want my fortune going to people who've shown me nothing but greed. Marry me, Emma. Be there with me until the end. In return, everything I own becomes yours. My properties, my investments, my entire estate. $50 billion, give or take. The number hung in the air between them like something tangible, Emma's hand went to her throat, and Harrison saw the exact moment the magnitude of what he was offering hit her. I can't possibly accept that. It's too much. We barely know each other. I know enough, Harrison replied. I know you work yourself to exhaustion to help your family. I know you treat dying strangers with more kindness than my own children have shown me in years. I know you're genuine in a world that taught me to trust no one. He leaned forward slightly. I'm not asking you to love me, Emma. I'm asking you to let me die with dignity, with someone kind beside me. And I'm asking you to let me do something meaningful with my wealth before I'm gone. Emma sank into the chair beside his bed, her mind clearly racing. Harrison could see the war happening behind her eyes, the practical need battling with her moral compass. My mother needs surgery she can't afford, Emma whispered finally. My brother might have to drop out of school next semester. I have $17,000 in credit card debt from my father's funeral. She looked up at him, tears glistening. Is it wrong that I'm actually considering this? It's human, Harrison said gently, and honest. Two qualities I value more than you know. The silence stretched between them, filled only with the soft beeping of medical equipment. Harrison waited, feeling oddly calm. He'd made his offer. The decision was hers. I need time to think, Emma finally said. Of course. Take 3 days. That's all I can spare. 3 days later, Emma returned to his treatment room with an answer written clearly on her face before she spoke. She'd made her choice, and Harrison Caldwell's final chapter was about to begin in a way he never could have anticipated. Yes, she said simply. I'll marry you, Harrison. The courthouse wedding took place on a gray Tuesday morning, witnessed only by Harrison's attorney and Emma's mother, a frail woman named Catherine, who wept quietly throughout the brief ceremony. Emma wore a simple cream-colored dress she'd owned for years, while Harrison appeared in one of his impeccable navy suits. There were no flowers, no music, no champagne toasts. Just two strangers signing documents that bound their lives together. For what everyone believed would be a tragically short time, as the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Harrison felt an unexpected tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with his illness. Emma's hand trembled slightly in his, and when she looked up at him with those clear blue eyes, he saw fear mixed with determination. She was terrified, but she was brave. He admired that more than she could know. The drive to his estate in Connecticut was quiet. Emma pressed her face to the window of the town car, watching the city give way to suburbs, then to the manicured landscapes of one of the wealthiest zip codes in America. When the car turned through the iron gates and the mansion came into view, a Georgian masterpiece of white columns and expansive windows set among 12 acres of gardens, Emma gasped softly. Our home now, Harrison corrected gently. For whatever time remains. Mrs. Chen, his housekeeper of 20 years, greeted them at the door with barely concealed surprise. Harrison had told his staff about the marriage only yesterday, and the news had clearly rippled through the household like a shockwave. Mrs. Chen's eyes took in Emma's modest dress, her single small suitcase, her worn shoes, and Harrison could practically hear the calculations happening behind that professional smile. Welcome, Mrs. Caldwell, Mrs. Chen said, the title sounding strange even to Harrison's ears. Emma flinched slightly at the name. Please, just Emma is fine. I'll show you to your rooms, Mrs. Chen continued, already moving toward the grand staircase. Rooms? Emma glanced at Harrison, confusion evident. I thought you'd prefer your own space, Harrison explained quietly. The master suite has an adjoining guest room that's been prepared for you. Complete privacy, but I'm close if you need anything. The relief that flooded Emma's face told Harrison he'd made the right decision. This arrangement was already unconventional enough. He wouldn't add discomfort to her burden. The guest room was larger than Emma's entire apartment had been. Floor 2 ceiling windows overlooked the gardens, where late autumn roses still bloomed in defiance of the approaching winter. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, dressed in linens that probably cost more than Emma made in a month. She set her suitcase down carefully, as if afraid to disturb anything. I know this is overwhelming, Harrison said from the doorway. Take your time settling in. Dinner is at 7, but if you'd prefer to eat alone tonight, I understand. Emma turned to face him, and something shifted in her expression. No, I mean, if it's all right, I'd like to have dinner with you. That's part of why I'm here, isn't it? So you're not alone? The simple kindness of her words struck Harrison harder than he'd expected. Yes, he managed. I'd like that very much. The first weeks developed a rhythm neither of them had anticipated. Emma woke early, a habit from years of double shifts, and discovered Harrison was also an early riser. They began sharing breakfast on the terrace when weather permitted, or in the sun-filled morning room when it didn't. Harrison read the financial papers while Emma scrolled through nursing journals on her tablet. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they simply existed in comfortable silence. Emma accompanied Harrison to his medical appointments. She held his hand during the harsh chemotherapy sessions that left him weak and nauseous. She learned which medications helped most with the pain, which foods he could stomach when nothing else would stay down. She was there on the bad days when the treatment seemed worse than the disease. Sitting beside his bed reading aloud from books she'd discovered in his library, one evening, about 3 weeks into their arrangement, Harrison emerged from his room after a particularly brutal treatment to find Emma had transformed the private theater room into something unexpected. Soft blankets covered the reclined seats, and the screen showed a nature documentary about the Amazon rainforest. I thought you might want a distraction, Emma said softly. When my father was sick, he said the documentaries made him feel like he was traveling even when he couldn't leave his bed. They watched 3 episodes that night. Emma curled in the seat beside him, occasionally glancing over to make sure he was all right. Harrison found himself watching her as much as the screen, noticing how her face lit up at baby animals, how she gasped at the beauty of hidden waterfalls, how completely present she was in each moment.
Oh.
Why are you really doing this? Harrison asked during a pause between episodes. The honest reason, Emma? Not the money? I know you needed that, but why say yes to something so strange? Emma was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the armrest. My father died surrounded by machines and strangers who were just doing their jobs. My mother and I were there, but we were so exhausted, so broken by that point. I kept thinking he deserved better. He deserved to go peacefully, with people who genuinely cared. She met Harrison's eyes. Nobody should die alone and afraid. Not even billionaire real estate moguls, who probably have a reputation for being ruthless. I'm ruthless, Harrison admitted. Or I was. I built my empire by being harder, smarter, more unforgiving than everyone else. And where did that get you? Emma asked, not unkindly. Here with a stranger, you had to offer $50 billion to get her to sit beside you. The truth of it stung, but Harrison found himself laughing, a sound that felt foreign after weeks of grimness. You're remarkably blunt for someone who's supposed to be comforting me. I'm a nurse. We're trained to tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially then, as November gave way to December, something unexpected began happening. Harrison found himself looking forward to Emma's presence, not just as a comfort against loneliness, but as something he actively wanted. The sound of her voice reading to him, the way she hummed while arranging flowers in the morning room, her terrible jokes she'd learned from elderly patients at the nursing home, the fierce way she defended him when his son called to complain about being cut out of the will. Emma, for her part, discovered layers to Harrison she hadn't expected. His encyclopedic knowledge of architecture and art, the way he'd built schools in underprivileged neighborhoods but never publicized it. His wry humor that emerged when the pain medication made him loopy. The gentleness in his hands when he helped her reach a book on a high shelf, steadying her, even though he was the one who was supposed to be weak. One night in mid-December, Harrison woke to find his bedroom empty and Emma gone from the adjoining room. Panic seized him until he heard sounds from the kitchen below. He found her there, still in her pajamas, making hot chocolate the old-fashioned way on the stove. Couldn't sleep, she explained when she saw him. My mind won't stop racing sometimes. About what? Emma poured 2 mugs and handed him one. About what happens after. To you, I mean, whether you're scared, whether I'm doing enough to make this easier. Harrison set down his mug and did something he hadn't planned. He reached out and took Emma's hand. You've given me something I didn't think I'd have at the end. These weeks with you have been more peaceful than years of my life before. You've done more than enough, Emma, more than I had any right to ask. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I don't want you to die, Harrison. I know that wasn't part of the deal. I know I'm supposed to just be here as a companion, but I don't want you to leave. Is that selfish? The confession hung between them, honest and raw. Harrison pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her in an embrace that felt both foreign and perfectly natural. Emma buried her face in his shoulder, and he felt her tears soaking through his shirt. It's not selfish, he whispered into her hair. It's the most beautiful thing anyone said to me in decades. They stood like that in the quiet kitchen, two people who'd been thrown together by desperate circumstances, discovering something neither had been looking for. When they finally pulled apart, Harrison cupped Emma's face in his hands and did something he'd sworn he wouldn't do. He kissed her, soft and gentle, and full of all the words he didn't know how to say. Emma kissed him back, and in that moment, their arrangement stopped being a transaction and became something infinitely more complicated and infinitely more real. The days following that first kiss transformed everything between Harrison and Emma. What had begun as a practical arrangement, a business deal wrapped in wedding vows, had evolved into something neither of them could deny anymore. Emma no longer slept in the guest room. Instead, she'd curl up beside Harrison in the master suite, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat as if memorizing its rhythm before it stopped forever. Harrison's condition continued to deteriorate, or so everyone believed. The treatments left him weaker, his appetite diminished, and there were days when getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain. But even in his physical decline, something else was growing stronger. The connection between him and Emma had become the one thing that made him want to fight, to hold on, to squeeze every possible moment from whatever time remained. Emma had quit her jobs at the clinic and nursing home to care for Harrison full-time. She monitored his medications, coordinated with his doctors, and became fiercely protective of his peace. When his son Richard showed up demanding to discuss the estate, Emma met him at the door and turned him away. Your father needs rest, not stress, she'd said firmly. If you want to see him, come as his son, not his heir. Richard had left furious. But Harrison, watching from the upstairs window, had never been prouder of anyone in his life. It was a cold January morning, 6 weeks into their marriage, when everything changed. Harrison woke, feeling different. Not worse, as he'd grown accustomed to, but strange in a way he couldn't identify. The persistent ache in his bones seemed lighter. The fog that usually clouded his thoughts had lifted slightly. Emma noticed immediately. You have color in your face, she said, pressing her palm to his forehead. And you're not as warm as yesterday. I feel odd, Harrison admitted. Not bad, just different. Dr. Peterson arrived for the scheduled home visit that afternoon. He'd been coming weekly to monitor Harrison's decline and adjust pain management. But this time, his examination took longer than usual. He listened to Harrison's heart repeatedly, checked his blood pressure 3 times, drew blood for immediate testing. What is it? Emma asked, her hand tight in Harrison's. What's wrong? I'm not sure anything's wrong, Dr. Peterson said slowly, but something is definitely different. Mr. Caldwell, your vital signs are stronger than they were last week. Significantly stronger. I want to run a full panel of tests at the hospital. Today, if possible. The hospital became their world for the next 48 hours. Harrison underwent every scan, every test, every examination the medical team could devise. Emma never left his side, sleeping in the chair beside his bed, holding his hand through procedures, whispering encouragement when the waiting became unbearable. On the second evening, Dr. Peterson entered Harrison's room with 3 other physicians and an expression that Emma couldn't read. She stood immediately, her heart hammering. Please sit down, both of you, Dr. Peterson said gently. Just tell us, Harrison said, his voice steady, despite the fear coursing through him. Whatever it is, we can handle it. Dr. Peterson looked down at the charts in his hands, then back up at them. Mr. Caldwell, we've reviewed all your recent tests and compared them extensively with your original diagnosis. We've also brought in specialists to verify our findings. There's no easy way to say this, so I'll be direct. You're not dying. The words didn't make sense at first. Emma heard them, but her brain couldn't process their meaning. Harrison just stared at the doctor, motionless. What? Emma whispered finally. The original diagnosis was wrong, Dr. Peterson continued, and now she could hear the emotion in his voice. Something between relief and professional embarrassment. Catastrophically wrong. What we thought was an aggressive cancer was actually a severe inflammatory condition that mimicked cancer on the imaging. It's rare, but it happens. The treatment you've been receiving, while harsh, has actually been helping resolve the inflammation. You're not terminal, Mr. Caldwell. With proper treatment, you should make a full recovery. The room seemed to tilt. Emma felt Harrison's hand grip hers so tightly it hurt, but she didn't care. She was crying, gasping, laughing all at once. Harrison pulled her into his arms and she felt his whole body shaking. How long? Harrison managed to ask. How long do I have? Dr. Peterson smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. Barring unforeseen circumstances? Decades, potentially. You're in otherwise excellent health for a man your age. Emma buried her face in Harrison's chest and sobbed. All the fear, all the grief she'd been carrying, all the preparation for losing him came pouring out. Harrison held her, his own tears falling into her hair. And for several minutes they simply clung to each other while the doctors quietly left to give them privacy. I'm not dying, Harrison said finally, wonder in his voice. Emma, I'm not dying. She pulled back to look at him, her face wet with tears. You're going to live. We're going to live, he corrected, cupping her face in his hands. Together, if you still want that. Emma laughed through her tears. You're asking me if I want to stay married to you now that you're not dying and I'm going to inherit $50 billion? Harrison, people are going to think I'm the worst kind of gold digger. Let them think what they want, Harrison said fiercely. I love you, Emma. I fell in love with you somewhere between the hospital visits and the late-night conversations and you standing up to my useless son. I love you, and not because you stayed when I thought I was dying. I love you because you made me want to live. I love you too, Emma whispered. I've been so scared to admit it because I thought I was going to lose you. I thought loving you would just make the end harder. But I couldn't help it, Harrison. I fell in love with you anyway. They kissed then, deep and passionate, and full of a future they'd both thought was impossible. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling through their tears. The next weeks were a whirlwind of adjusted treatments, lifestyle changes, and slowly rebuilding Harrison's strength. But more than that, they were about rebuilding their relationship on a new foundation. They were no longer a dying man and his compassionate companion. They were simply two people in love, learning how to be married for real. Emma moved her things fully into the master suite, not as a caretaker, but as a wife. They took walks through the gardens, as Harrison's strength returned, his arm around her waist, planning the future together. They talked about traveling to all the places Harrison had been too busy to visit when he was building his empire. They discussed the charitable foundation Emma wanted to establish to help families drowning in medical debt like hers had been. Harrison's children reacted predictably to the news of his recovery and his genuine marriage too. Emma. Richard threatened lawsuits until Harrison cut him off entirely. His daughter Jessica called from London, and Harrison had a long, honest conversation with her for the first time in years. She was skeptical at first, but when she visited and saw how Harrison and Emma were together, something in her softened. She makes you happy, Jessica observed one evening while Emma was in the kitchen. I've never seen you this relaxed, this content. Not even with Mom. Your mother and I married for the wrong reasons, Harrison admitted. Money, status, family expectations. Emma and I started from an unusual place, but somehow we found something real. The social fallout was exactly as Emma had predicted. The society pages buzzed with speculation and thinly veiled accusations. Former friends whispered about how quickly Emma had trapped the vulnerable billionaire. But Harrison and Emma faced it together, united. And gradually the noise faded to background static they both learned to ignore. 6 months after the corrected diagnosis, on a warm July evening, Harrison and Emma stood in the gardens of their estate. Harrison had arranged something special, a renewal of their vows, but this time done properly. The gardens were filled with white roses and twinkling lights. Emma's mother was there, healthy now after the surgery Emma had been able to afford. Her brother had graduated college and brought his girlfriend, Even Jessica had flown in from London with her family. Emma wore a proper wedding dress this time. Simple and elegant. And when Harrison saw her walking toward him through the roses, his breath caught in his throat. She was so beautiful, so radiant, so completely his. They exchanged new vows, ones they'd written themselves. Words about love that wasn't guaranteed, about finding each other in the darkness, about choosing each other every day not because of money or obligation, but because life was simply better together. "I married you thinking I had 8 weeks to live," Harrison said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet garden. "You gave me a reason to want more time, and now that I have it, I want to spend every moment loving you the way you deserve to be loved, completely, honestly, forever." Emma's vows were simpler, but no less powerful. "You taught me that love doesn't follow a schedule or make logical sense. You taught me that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is take a chance on something impossible. I choose you, Harrison, today and every day after." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife for the second time, their kiss was met with genuine applause and not a dry eye in the garden. Later that night, as they lay together in their bedroom, Emma curled against Harrison's chest. He whispered, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the diagnosis had been correct? If I really had only had 2 months?" Emma was quiet for a moment, then tilted her head to look at him. "I think we still would have fallen in love. Maybe faster, maybe more desperately, but we would have found each other anyway. Some things are just meant to be, even a dying billionaire and his practical nurse, especially them," Emma smiled. "Because we didn't fall in love with who we were supposed to be. We fell in love with who we actually are." Harrison pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his. He thought about all the years he'd wasted chasing wealth and power, thinking they would fill the emptiness inside him. He thought about how close he'd come to dying alone, bitter and unloved. And he thought about the twist of fate that had brought Emma into his life, that had given him not an ending, but a beginning. Outside, the summer night sang with crickets and the soft rustle of wind through the gardens. Inside, Harrison Caldwell held his wife and felt, for the first time in his entire privileged, powerful, previously empty life, truly wealthy, not because of the billions in his accounts or the properties bearing his name, or the empire he'd built through ruthless determination. He was wealthy because he had Emma, because he had love, because he had tomorrow and the day after that, and years stretching ahead filled with possibility. The deal they'd made in a hospital treatment. Room had been for 2 months of companionship in exchange for a fortune, but what they'd found instead was something no amount of money could ever buy. They'd found each other, found love, found home, and that, Harrison thought as Emma's breathing deepened into sleep, was the greatest fortune of all. Thank you for taking Thed time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like. Share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.